We are big fans of Hyundai here at Electrifying. It's a company that produces some of the most efficient, practical, good value for money, pure electric cars there are. Cars like the Kona and Ioniq Electric, and they've been doing it for a very long time.
But there are just a couple of issues. Firstly, the cars aren't exactly fashion forward in terms of how they look. And secondly, the company has never had a bespoke electric car before. Until now. And that is those 2 points answered then, because this new Ioniq 5 was born to be electric, and it also looks a bit vogue. Goodness me, talk about a love it or hate it Marmite car. The Ioniq 5 looks like somebody who really likes the 1980s designed it, and then just thought, actually the 80s were really cool, so why not build it? Yes, folks, this is the version you can actually buy. As for me, well, I'm actually pretty taken with it. But then, oh, how I love the 80s. What on earth are you thinking? There's nothing good about the 80s, and it was definitely not your finest hour. What do you mean? I looked really cool in the 80s. That is debatable. See? Can't even agree with myself about this car.
I mean, look at the sharp angles, the slashed wheel arches and strakes down the bottom of the doors, the big angular shapes down the sides, more grills at the back and the dot matrix lights, which Hyundai calls parametric pixels.
I used to have a printer that did that. In fact, it reminds me of a game, wasn't it? Tetris? Anyway, the whole thing makes me want to sing Madonna songs, pump up my shoulder pads, perm my hair, let's get into the groove. All right, maybe not the perming bit. I did that once. It was an absolute disaster. Anyway, I digress. Let's talk about the solar roof. Yes, you can be driving on sunshine. Stop. Hyundai reckon solar power can add a few miles a day to it. Now, it doesn't sound like much, but if you add it up over the year, then it's definitely worth having. It's an option. It won't be available on the first wave of UK cars, but hopefully it will come. I should be so lucky. No. You want to know something that does really annoy me? Well, two things actually. Look at these super complicated wheels. Well, for one, they are going to be an absolute nightmare to clean. And also look at the way they're set up. They spin the same way as the wheel arch slashes on the side and in the opposite direction on the other side. I know that's a very small point, but the lack of symmetry really irritates me. This version has a 20s. The less expensive model will have 19s. But look, the whole thing just looks fresh, doesn't it? And it actually starts actual conversation, and not just about the fact that it's electric. But the looks, well, they are definitely going to divide opinion. So do let us know what you think in the comments below. And also don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I'm sorry if that makes you feel under pressure.
On a more practical note, it might look like a small hatchback in pictures, but it is big. In fact, it's within a couple of inches of a Jaguar I-Pace in all directions. The Ioniq's wheelbase, that's the distance between the centre of the wheels, is actually 3 metres, longer than a BMW 5 Series. In fact, you could park a smart car between the axles. Now that does bring big car refinement, but it also means that even though the nose and tail aren't particularly long, it's not exactly tiny if you're nipping in and out of tight parking spaces.
What it really gives you is loads and loads of space on the inside, and that's where the Ioniq 5 really starts to make sense. So come with me. First thing you'll notice is that I can just shimmy along from the passenger side into the driver's side because of the flat floor and all the general space. I've never really thought about this before, but it would be very handy in a tight car park, especially as this isn't exactly a compact car. It would also really work on my drive, which is so narrow I can only get into my car from one side. It's as though the whole thing has been designed and made, especially for me.
Now this centre console moves either forwards or backwards 140 millimetres, depending on whether you need more space in the front or the back. Hyundai calls it the Universal Island, which is a bit grand, but it really does make sense to adapt the interior space to whatever you need it to be. We've seen this on other electric cars, but it's still a very cool feature. Up front, you have twin 12.3-inch screens and a kind of widescreen TV arrangement, and it does look very swish. The right-hand side part on this left-hand drive car is touchscreen, and it works quickly and intuitively. Looks like Hyundai has learned some lessons there. There's also an optional head-up display too, which turns your windscreen into yet more information, and it works really well. Plus, there are physical buttons for things like the climate control, something that all the Electrifying gang really like. But you can have a bit too much tech, you know, and there is an awful lot in here. Not sure Tommy agrees with me on that, but don't worry, Tommy, we're never going to give you up.
It feels very concept car in here, which I mean as a massive compliment, because I do think this interior is a lovely place to be. There's some great details, including trim that's made from recycled plastic bottles, and you have eco-friendly paint. The headliner, the carpets and the seat covers are partly made from sugarcane, would you believe? It all feels really nicely put together. Look, there's a few bits where the plastic feels a little bit scratchy and low rent, but overall this is better looking and feeling than the VW Group rivals. And that is not something we thought we'd be saying about Hyundai's cars a few years ago.
Previous Hyundai electric cars have always felt robustly made, but they just weren't that exciting. Now this is a car that does completely address that. You see this bit here that looks like a speaker? Well, it's a magnetic signboard to which you can attach whatever you want, really. It's clean and it's calm design with loads of slick surfaces that just feel less busy than you're used to. It's a really nice place to chill out inside.
Now, in some specs, the front seats actually fold back to make a kind of single bed. Perfect, I guess, if you need to grab 40 winks whilst you're charging. Pillow, please. Thank you. Duvet. Time for me to relax.
And it's practical too. The back is a great place to be. Look, I know I'm not a giant, but there's huge amounts of space. And there's even a 3-pin plug for your laptop too. The boot is a good size, although it's a bit shallow compared to some rivals. And there's a little frunk up front where you can store the cables in. Back inside there is storage. Upon storage. Upon storage. You could lose hours just counting the places you can lose things.
As for the good bit, the driving, well, I've started at the top with this version. It's fitted with the largest 72.6 kilowatt hour battery, 2 motors and 4-wheel drive. So that means a hefty 300 brake horsepower and a 0 to 62 time of 5.2 seconds. It's the kind of speed you'd be getting from a supercar just a couple of decades ago. And it's in an electric Hyundai. It's really quite mind-blowing, all that, isn't it?
When it comes to range, depending on what battery you go for, the larger one or a smaller 54 kilowatt hour battery, and whether you opt for 4-wheel drive, you'll get between 240 and 298 miles of official range.
Now, the quoted range on this car with the 4-wheel drive is 268 miles. I've only been driving it for a couple of hours, so it's pretty hard to be too detailed on efficiency. But at the moment, I'm only getting 3.2 miles per kilowatt hour, which is a bit disappointing, but we will report back on that when I've spent longer in the car. So, how does it drive? Well, as I've said, I've only spent a few hours in it, but first impressions are good. It's a very chilled car, kind of reflects its laid-back interior. Now, even though the batteries are underneath the floor and the centre of gravity does feel low, it does feel more limousine-y than sporty. It's not that it can't go fast, it doesn't seem to really revel in it though. And there is just a bit of body roll going into the corners. One thing I do really like though are the levels of regeneration. Now, this is where the car captures the power that it would normally lose and puts that back into the battery. So you've got 3 different driving modes here. Normal, sporty, which just tightens things up a bit. It doesn't feel massively different, if I'm honest. But I've been using it mainly in eco mode because I do like the one-pedal driving feel that you get with regen. And that just gives really nice, gentle level of regeneration. You can lift your foot off the accelerator, as I'm doing now, and the car's slowing down on its own. However, on the paddles here next to the steering wheel, you can also put it into something called iPedal. very similar to Nissan's e-pedal, just a different letter. So that really ramps up the regeneration, and you get true one-pedal driving when you use that. Again, it is something that takes a bit of getting used to if you're new to electric cars, but personally, I absolutely love it. The other thing I really love is how quiet it is in here. Listen, it's very quiet. In fact, the levels of refinement are really impressive, and I reckon it could probably give the German car makers a run for its money when it comes to refinement. Again, who'd have thought we'd be saying that about a Hyundai just a few years ago? One of the big deals about the Ioniq 5 though is the mixture of tech and convenience, because this is a car that brings expensive charging capability to a cheaper car. Remember the brilliant but expensive Audi e-tron GT? Well, it has what's called an 800 volt electrical system, twice the voltage of a normal electric car, which means the wires stay cooler, can be physically smaller, and the electricity can move around far easier. The Ioniq 5 has the same system, and it charges like grease lightning. It will basically take any amount of charge you can throw at it. Stick it on a 350 kilowatt rapid charger like the ones you'll see popping up at service stations now. You can get from 10 to 80% in under 20 minutes. A 5-minute splash and dash, good for over 60 miles of charge. Barely the time it takes you to grab a coffee.
It's also got some really interesting other bits of tech. Some are obvious, like over-the-air updates and a full suite of controls from your phone via the BlueLink app, right through to the option of a £365 Vehicle 2 load pack, which lets you draw up to 3.6 kilowatts of power from the Ioniq's battery to power anything you can think of, including your own house or other electric cars. Just think, you could become an electric car rescue truck. It also senses if another vehicle is approaching from behind or the side and temporarily locks the back doors to prevent kids from spilling themselves out in front of a car. It's called Safe Exit Assist, and you know what? It makes me happy to think about it.
And there is a remote parking trick, which is part of the £1,500 tech pack that includes things like those relaxation seats and some of the driver assistance. It's called RSPA, Remote Smart Parking Assist, and it really does make your car remote controlled, which would be very handy if your parking space is tight.
So it's good then, but what are we talking about when it comes to money? Well, the range works something like this. The base SE Connect with rear-wheel drive and the smaller battery costs just over £36,000 before options, meaning it doesn't make use of the government's grant for electric cars under £35,000. But it does get a decent kit list as standard, including the full-size screens we have in our top-spec car, Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, LED head and tail lights, and all the more usual driver assistance systems. Our in premium spec comes in either small or large battery flavours with either rear or four-wheel drive, and that starts at £38,600, tops out at just over £44,500. There are even more safety systems, along with useful heated and powered seats, more funky headlights, and other primping like bigger wheels. But you can get top spec with the smaller battery if that suits your range needs, as well as the bigger batteries and drivetrains. Now that tops out at £48,145 with so many gadgets that I find it hard to even find them all, let alone list them. Weirdly though, this is the only car that gets the Eco Pack, heat pump and battery heater as standard, but make the best use of the thermal efficiency when it's chilly. Otherwise, that's a £1,200 option. You also get a 5-year unlimited mileage warranty and 2-year subscription to the Ionity charging network to get the best out of whatever big power chargers you can lay your hands on.
Let me give you an example of what happens when a committee tries to design a feature to take on Tesla. You get this. Sounds of nature. Now, lively forest and calm ocean waves can kind of get those. Quite nice for chilling out, meditating perhaps. Bit of yoga whilst you're waiting to charge. Rainy day. What were they thinking? We don't need any more rainy days in the UK. Make it stop. And this, open air cafe. Open air cafe, it's not even a sound of nature. Although it might have been handy during lockdown because I could have brought my coffee into the car and sat here and imagined that I was seeing people, couldn't I? This one, the warm fireplace, kind of get that, could be really handy on a date. But dating was also very challenging during lockdown, so I'm told. But this one is the weirdest. Snowy Village. Yeah, I have no idea why you would feel the need to drive along listening to footprints crunching in the snow. But you know what? It's there if you ever feel like you do. It's very weird.
So, is the Ioniq 5 a thriller, or is this a case of tainted love? Well, there is a lot that is thrilling about it. That brilliant fast charging capability for starters, the fantastic interior, just the fact that it's different. But you know, my grandma always used to tell me that in life less is more. You know the kind of thing. Take off the big necklace just before you go out because you don't need it if you're already wearing the big earrings. But the Ioniq 5 has kept the big necklace on, along with the earrings, and then it's added an armful of bangles and another necklace for good measure. Look, I know loads of you will love the fact that this car is in the Honda E school of quirkiness, but I do worry a little that what looks like the height of fashion now may not stand the test of time. As ever, if you want to know more about the Ioniq 5 or its sister car that's due soon from Kia, the EV6, or any of the other great electric cars that are heading our way this year, then please do head over to electrifying.com where we can clear the air for you. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and switch your notifications on so you know when our latest video has landed.